Good evening, dreamers. Tonight's dream takes us to an abandoned church in Rome. What secrets are buried here, and should they even be unearthed? While you're still lucid, now is your chance to like, subscribe, and leave a comment on this video with your thoughts and ideas for our next theme. Thank you. Enjoy. The camera jostled violently as she vaulted over the rusted remnants of a chain-link fence, her breath sharp and rhythmic, like a drumbeat. Ahead, the decaying carcass of the abandoned asylum loomed. A brutalist monolith of shattered windows and blackened graffiti. Every step she took echoed in the skeletal corridors of the building, as if the place itself were alive and drawing breath. Behind her, the New York police were yelling, their shouts muffled by the walls she slipped between. The chase had been going on for 10 minutes now, a dance of adrenaline and exhaustion. Come on, she muttered under her breath, skidding through the shattered remains of an old hospital wing. Her GoPro caught every moment. Her footfalls sent plumes of dust rising from the cracked tile floor. She leapt across a chasm where the floor had collapsed into the basement below, grabbing a rusted pipe and swinging to safety on the other side. A misstep would have broken her legs, or worse, but she made it look effortless. The viewers loved this sort of thing. She burst through a boarded-up window and out into the urban jungle again, dropping 2 stories to a dumpster below with an elegant roll to break the fall. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing faint as she sprinted into the shadows. The video ended with her signature outro, a still frame of her grinning, a bloody scrape across her cheek, and the words, "Subscribe for more chaos," stenciled in blocky letters over the screen. The channel, Urbex Scars, had grown from a novelty into a cultural phenomenon. Millions tuned in to watch her antics, scaling forgotten skyscrapers, navigating sewers, and outrunning authorities in places she shouldn't have been. Which was exactly how she got the email. The subject line read, "Private hire, highly paid opportunity in Italy." Normally, she'd have ignored it. Most of those offers were garbage. Rich trust fund kids wanting her to scale a building for Instagram clout. But this one was different. The tone was serious, professional, and the money on the table was obscene. The email was signed only with initials VD and included a plane ticket to Rome. The attached itinerary was meticulous, giving her no reason to suspect anything amiss. 3 days later, she was on a flight. When she landed, a black car was waiting for her. The man who greeted her wore a crisp black suit and spoke perfect, flat English. He handed her an envelope containing her first payment, half the agreed amount.
You will be exploring an old church in the mountains outside the city,
He explained.
It was abandoned centuries ago. The goal is simple. Retrieve an artifact called the Verimatra, a dagger shaped like a cross. You understand?
She nodded.
No cameras.
He added sharply, his tone shifting.
This job is to remain private.
She smiled, nodding again, while her mind ran to the GoPro tucked in her bag. Descending through the collapsed altar was like being swallowed whole by the earth. The narrow stone staircase spiraled downward into suffocating darkness, each step coated in years of grime and mold. Her flashlight illuminated ancient crumbling walls, their surface crawling with roots that had punctured the stone like vines. The first real obstacle was a jagged crevice, where the stairs had crumbled away entirely. Below, she could hear the slow drip of water into a pool she couldn't see. Her heart hammered as she calculated the jump. This wasn't a polished skyscraper or a rooftop with safety nets. If she missed, she wouldn't just fall, she'd vanish into an abyss. She backed up, took a deep breath, and leapt. Her fingers scraped the far edge. Pain shot through her arm as the stone tore at her palm. But she managed to pull herself up, gasping. She flexed her hand under the flashlight's beam. A deep cut ran across her palm, dark blood smearing the filthy stone beneath her.
Damn it,
she muttered, wrapping her hands in a strip of cloth torn from her sleeve. The tunnels beyond were worse. The walls closed in until she had to turn sideways to squeeze through. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps, the sound amplified by the oppressive silence. At one point, her flashlight flickered, and for a heart-stopping moment, she was plunged into complete darkness. Come on, she whispered, shaking the flashlight until the beam sputtered back to life. The floor began to slant downward, slick with moss and damp. Her footing slipped, sending her crashing to her knees. She bit back a scream as sharp rocks tore into her skin. She examined the wounds briefly. Scrapes, bruises, but the realization that cuts could easily get infected gnawed at her. Still, she pressed on. Further in, she found the first sign that someone had been here before. On the wall, carved in uneven strokes, was an inscription. She paused to examine it, the GoPro on her chest catching every detail. Ferrum atra, injurum user sibi camosti. The Latin was indecipherable to her, but the crude drawing beneath it wasn't. It depicted a cloaked figure stabbing a victim with a cross-shaped dagger. Blood flowed freely, not just from the victim, but from the attacker as well. In the background, something monstrous loomed. A horned, shadowy figure, its eyes two pits of flame.
Okay, that's not creepy at all,
she whispered, her voice shaky. The labyrinth fought her at every turn. She found herself crawling through a low, flooded passage where the ceiling scraped against her back. The cold water numbed her hands and knees, and she prayed she wasn't disturbing anything alive beneath the surface. Her flashlight reflected off pale, slimy shapes drifting just beneath the waterline. Something about them was off. Not quite fish. She pushed the thought from her mind and kept moving. In another section, she had to climb a vertical shaft where chunks of stone jutted out like uneven rungs. Each foothold was precarious, slick with moisture. Midway up, a chunk of stone gave way under her weight, sending her dangling by one arm. Her scream echoed through the tunnels as the chunks smashed into the ground below. "Focus," she hissed to herself, her muscles trembling as she reached for the next hold. Finally, she emerged into a cavernous chamber. The air was freezing, and the floor was littered with remnants of some forgotten ritual. Melted candles, broken bones, and strange symbols etched into the stone. In the center of the room was an altar, its surface blackened as if scorched by fire. Embedded in its center was the dagger, the Pheramatra. It was beautiful and grotesque at once. The blade gleamed unnaturally in the dim light, its surface covered in intricate etchings. The hilt was unmistakably a cross, yet it seemed perverse in its design, the edges sharpened like a weapon in itself. Her hand hovered over it for a moment, hesitation creeping in. The GoPro captured everything as she grabbed the dagger and yanked it free. The room seemed to exhale around her, the air shifting in a way she couldn't quite explain. She shoved the blade into her bag, turned, and began the treacherous journey back. The cultists ambushed her the moment she stepped back into the main church. Their hands grabbed her arms and legs, dragging her toward the altar, despite her wild kicks and screams.
Let me go! Let me go!
She shrieked, but they only tightened their grip. The leader stood at the altar, his voice a low, guttural chant. The dagger was pulled from her bag and laid reverently on the blackened surface.
"You don't understand what you've brought us,"
he said, his voice cold.
"But you'll see soon enough."
Panic seized her. In a burst of adrenaline, she broke free from one of the cultists and lunged for the dagger. Her fingers closed around the hilt, and she turned blindly, stabbing the leader in the chest. Pain exploded in her hand as the dagger's curse bit into her. She screamed as blood poured from her palm, the wounds matching those she'd inflicted on the leader. He collapsed, his blood mingling with hers on the altar. The cultists froze, their ritual broken. Some fled, others fell to their knees, wailing incoherently. She didn't wait to find out what would happen next. Clutching her wounded hand, she stumbled out of the church and into the night. Back in New York, she sat at her desk, staring at the laptop screen. The GoPro footage played in silence, the glow casting long shadows across her dimly lit room. She winced as she watched herself crawling through the labyrinth, her grunts of effort and pain now distant echoes. Then came the altar room scene. Her heart raced as she watched herself approach the Ferramatra. She paused the video, her fingers trembling slightly. There was something she hadn't noticed before. A glint on the dagger's blade when she first touched it. She rewound, slowed the footage, and leaned closer. The reflection on the blade, it wasn't hers. At first, it was a blur, distorted by the angle and the dim light. But as she advanced frame by frame, she saw it. A faint silhouette emerging where the blood had smeared the blade. A figure with sharp horns, shoulders broad as mountains, and a face that seemed to split into infinite twisting patterns. Its eyes burned with a smoldering orange light, piercing even through the low resolution of the footage. Her breath caught in her throat. "No," she whispered. She zoomed in further, her screen filling with the distorted reflection. The figure wasn't still. It was moving, slowly, almost imperceptibly. Its head turned, and for a moment, she swore it was looking at her. She slammed her laptop shut, her chair scraping loudly against the floor as she stumbled back. The room was silent, save for the pounding of her heartbeat. Her scarred hand throbbed, a dull ache pulsing up her arm. The laptop pinged, the sound of a new email. But she couldn't bring herself to open it again. She knew what she had seen, and she knew that the demon wasn't just in the reflection. It was watching her now, waiting.